and welcome to For the Love of Nature, a podcast where we tell you everything you need to know about nature, and probably more than you wanted to know. I'm Laura Fawks Lapole.
And I'm Katy Holloway, and today we're going to be talking about how humans have negatively impacted our waterways throughout history, but we're trying to improve them today.
Positive spin on it.
Yeah, right? Basically, we've sucked in the past, and we're trying to fix it now. Yeah. So we're going to talk about rivers. So Laura and I have each picked a river that we're going to focus on about how humans have messed it up and what we're going to be doing, or hopefully going to be doing, to fix it and have some hope for the future.
Yep. But I guess let's start off with the nature news.
Yes, absolutely. So let's see here. Yeah, you go first.
Okay, cool. So I was reading this story last week. It came up on my Facebook because Facebook always knows what I want to hear. It's ancient footprints could be the oldest traces of humans in the Americas.
I saw that, yeah.
So cool. So they found footprints in, was it White Sands National Park?
I believe it was, yeah.
In New Mexico. And they believe that they're 22,500 years old, which is thousands of years before they thought humans were even here.
Yeah.
And you might be thinking, how do they know that? Because there were seeds in the footprints that they then carbon dated.
Which is so cool anyway.
Yes.
That it was just, so cool.
Yeah. And that they found them, like there were mammoth prints above them in the layers of rock.
Crazy.
Yeah. But, they think that they were made by either children or teenagers. Which, unless, I mean...
Okay, listen, I have size... Yeah, I was gonna say, I have size 5 feet. Like, it looks like a tiny hobbit or just running around, like a little elfling running around, so...
They think that because, of course, it had to be near water, because remember our fossils episode, we were talking about, the importance of mud and water. So they think that it was a bunch of teenagers just hanging out by the river. Which, totally relatable.
I was going to say, that sounds very accurate.
Humans have never changed.
Yeah.
All right, that's my nature news.
Alrighty, so mine is that there was a Belgian woman that was banned from a zoo after a 4-year affair with a chimpanzee.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so what? Not an actual affair.
Okay.
But it is a catchy headline. So what had happened?
I would have been like,
what? Yeah, exactly. So there was in Belgium. There's a zoo. What was it? Which one was it? Antwerp Zoo. And let's see here. There was a chimpanzee named Cheetah who arrived there about 30 years ago. And over the past 4 years, Addie Timmermans has visited the primate every single week. And of course, she developed a close bond with the animal. And she's quoted as saying, "I love that animal and he loves me. I haven't got anything else. Why do they want to take that away? We're having but she says, we're having an affair, I'll just say." So basically what started happening was that she was visiting him often enough that the chimp was not going about his normal chimp ways.
Gotcha.
And being way more I don't know, just looking forward to or distracted by her, that he wasn't playing with the other chimps because he was waiting for her.
It was crazy if that's only once a week.
Right? Yeah, and that's what I was saying. I was okay, so I was okay, no.
I mean, he was in love then.
Yeah, clearly. But also, what kind of enrichment were they doing for the chimps, and was it enough
that was the highlight?
Yeah, that was the highlight of his week. So anyway, they started quoting the spokesperson for the zoo said, the animal ended up being too focused on people and it's less respected by its peers. And we want Cheetah to be a chimpanzee as much as possible. So they ended up banning the lady, and she's not allowed to go back. And she clearly is very upset about it. But the keepers are now working to help Cheetah learn to interact more with his fellow primates. So that's my nature news.
Poor Cheetah.
Right?
Cheetah is the name of a chimp in some movie.
I feel like it is. An older one, isn't it?
Yes. But
not like Tarzan, is it?
I was just gonna say, I think it's Tarzan.
Is it?
I do. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Your guess is probably better than mine. I'm horrible with knowing movie stuff.
And I've seen a lot of Tarzan.
Yeah. Go watch our Nature Hotties episode if you haven't already.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me kick things off with the river stuff. So I wanted to discuss the Chehalis River.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is probably all of us on the East Coast and around the world have never heard of this river.
Yeah.
It's the second largest river in Washington State. So just imagine a beautiful river through the mountains and woods.
Sounds perfect.
Leads into the Pacific. It is the watershed, so all the water that is leading into this river is about 2,700 square miles. And it's home to many different species, including salmon, which is kind of what it's known for.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on with the Chehalis River? So all of the information that I'm about to tell you, should be able to find. There's both a website and a documentary on this river, because it's been kind of a hot topic in the last few years. It's called Chehalis, a watershed moment. And then there's like the Chehalis Basin Strategy website. So there's been a lot of things that have happened over the years in the Chehalis River Valley. Humans want to change the landscape to how it works best for them. So this valley was carved out. Well, it formed when the glaciers retreated and all the floodwaters happened. So it's this big, deep valley that is, geologically inclined to flood.
I guess it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a floodplain. There's, you can battle nature as much as you want.
Yeah.
But it is going to try and always be a floodplain.
Yeah.
Which makes it great for farming because of the soil.
Yes.
So that's the unfortunate thing. So, over the years, when it's been settled, farmers, logging was huge, totally. The pictures are horrific for anyone who likes trees. When you imagine the entire river covered in. They're standing on these giant piles in the river, sending them down. It's crazy. So over time,
so if you go back to our plant sentience and we talk about how trees are alive and it's just
bodies.
Yeah, just bodies floating down the river as trees on the shore just screaming. Anyway, none of that's gonna make sense unless you go back and listen to that plant episode. Yeah. Plant sentience, I think is what we call it. Sentience? Yeah. I think it's Oh, goodness. Continue.
So another thing, so we're using our rivers as examples, but this is happening to rivers everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere.
So none of this is this is unique to the Chehalis.
Yeah, no.
So one major thing that really stood out to me that I've never thought about before, because of course I've thought about dams and erosion and all that things, was the removal of snags, logs, and other natural barriers in a waterway.
Yes.
And you're okay, they're making the river cleaner. No, not exactly. So a natural river has fallen logs in it and rocks and all sorts of barriers that are fantastic for wildlife to live in, necessary for them, and stops, it decreases the flow rate when there is a flood.
Yeah.
And just, it's the natural way.
Well, yeah, it's the natural way because it's been doing that. It's gone that direction for a reason. You know what I mean? Things have happened for a reason and it works. So just let nature do what nature needs to do.
Right.
And we'll be okay.
Yeah. But those waterways are very hard to navigate. And especially in early settling, waterways were the roadways. So they pulled it all out. So what has that, because of that, now there is catastrophic flooding. I'm talking biblical flooding of this valley occasionally, destroying so much property damage, risking human life, ruining wildlife habitat. It's they call them the 100-year floods. Well, multiple ones have happened.
Wow.
And it's becoming more and more often, probably because of climate change. So it's just a whole bunch of things. So because they've pulled out all the snags, the water's able to come through easier. The area is already prone to flooding.
Yeah.
And because of the flow, erosion is happening, but not just because of the flow, but also because there is no trees on the sides of the river.
It just keeps getting worse.
Yeah. It's just compounded. And even though there's an increased flow rate, like during floods, there are lower flows in the summer so if you've got a healthy watershed, it is controlling the amount of water that is constantly there.
Yes.
It keeps it pretty medium. There isn't too high, there isn't too low. The trees are sucking up the water, they're letting things go when they need to. So, in like the winter, there's like insane flooding. In the summer, the flow is bare minimum, which is leading to really high water temperature. And because there's no snags or any logs, there's no shade in that river.
Jeez.
Which means all the fish are dying. So the Chehalis salmon and the steelhead are keystone species, and they have declined 63 to 93% depending on the species.
Yeah.
And like
it's just stories like this that I just want to be like, we're all screwed.
I know. And you know, these salmon are extremely important for both wildlife and humans. They provide tons of food. In the documentary, they show you like the carcass of one that's been eaten by a bear, and of course humans like to eat salmon. And not just the way we think of humans liking salmon, like at the grocery store and things. There are Native Americans or American Indians that are extremely active in this area.
Yeah, it's more of a sustenance food for them. It's not a like for us, like for me, if I want salmon, it's a luxury. You know what I mean?
Right,
like I don't need it, but they actually rely on it.
Yeah, well, right, because they're business, like they have businesses that come up around it, and it's important to their culture. Like it's like, you know, so the Quinault Nation and the Chehalis tribe are both active in its conservation and have a pretty big say in what's going on in this area, or at least they would like to. And then because of the removal of snags, there's also, of course, like I said, less habitat for other aquatic life, even besides the fish.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the bad stuff that's been going on, and I could go on and on and on about the bad stuff.
Give me hope, Laura.
Yeah. So because of it's really, I mean, the salmon, yes, it's the salmon and the flooding that have people can't take it anymore. So it's a really cool documentary because it is...
Okay. So my experience from knowing about this river is the salmon, which is so interesting because you would think like, you know, multiple 100-year floods, that would be the red flag for people. No, it's like salmon pushed people over the edge. Yeah. Which I know is like the money aspect of it, but still.
Yeah. And so in the documentary they're interviewing, there's, you know, when we're talking about conservation, you want to think about all your stakeholders. You know, it's not just conservationists, it's also the people that live there. So we've got farmers, we've got tribal nations, we've got conservationists, a whole bunch of people, and they all have different opinions on what needs to be done to save this river, or what should be done to save them and their property. So the proposed impacts, both, you know, depending on your viewpoint, some of these impacts might be good, some of them might be bad. It's just something's got to be done about this river. So who's making this decision? It's the Chehalis Basin. Well, the plan is the Chehalis Basin Strategy, and it's run by a board comprised of state, local, and tribal leaders. And the goal is a twofold. It's to improve aquatic habitat and to protect communities and landscapes from flooding. So at least, like, you know, it's not just human-centric. It's trying to do everything. So I'll start with what I think is the big negative impact, and it's a very divisive topic, and it's a retention dam.
Okay.
And it'd be in the headwaters.
Ooh.
And so people are
freaking out.
People are very upset about this.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, this is absolutely necessary. Our farms are being flooded. So the plan is, if they build this dam, that it would only be activated during floods. Other than that, it would be letting water through. However, no matter what way you look at it, it is going to have a very negative impact on fish populations, because fish and dams never work out.
Yeah.
There's even, we've tried like fish elevators and all sorts of things.
Yep. Everybody's, we've been there, done that.
It's just
this
not
doesn't work.
a very good solution. Yeah. And this is one of the last undammed rivers in the state, if not the last undammed river in the state.
Yeah, right.
And so a lot of people are like, no way, it's gonna ruin the salmon. It's gonna flood everyone behind the river, like, in the headwaters, because of course there will be somewhat of a reservoir when it floods. It's going to create a lake. And like some people who are right at the base of the dam, they're like, if the dam
breaks,
fails, we're screwed. We don't even, like, up in the headwaters, they're not flooding. So those people are the ones that have never had to deal with the flooding, and they're like, but we will if the dam, So I can definitely see, I mean, of course, nobody wants, their house to be destroyed, their livelihoods to be destroyed. It's a terrible thing. So they've been doing, for years, they've been doing evaluations on whether or not this dam should happen. And for sure, the tribal nations are against it, and several farmers and other stakeholders are against it as well. So instead, at least in the meantime, they've been building levees. So to stop the water.
Yeah, to try
the
and
highway.
Yeah.
And some other places. And they are trying to create floodplains in strategic places and then connect those floodplains. So if they can do that, then at least divert the water. And honestly, I think that's the only way it's ever going to work, because water is unbeatable. You cannot beat, like, there is no taming water.
Yeah, it's going to do what it's going to do. Like, you can move it around, because there's a huge project here where we are in Fort Worth about trying to, and it's, floodplain mitigation and trying to, but like you said, like, there's only so much you can do. Like, no matter how much people are like, oh no, this is going to work. No, like, it's going to do what it wants to do. Right. You can try, but sometimes it's just not going to work.
Yeah, you're battling a force of nature, and nature always wins in the end.
If it wants to, if it wants to.
So, at least diverting the water to where it will do the least damage, or, things like that.
Yeah.
So besides building levees, besides the retention dam, floodplains, they'd also like to remove fish passage barriers. So that could be like connecting the floodplains, just any barriers for the fish. They need more help.
Yeah. Or any help at this point. Just any help.
And then lastly, they would like to replace removed barriers with man-made ones. So, how I was talking, we removed all these snags.
Oh, yeah.
They're either gonna put big old trees back in the stream, or they can kind of dam off little pieces, sink in big posts.
Gotcha.
And then that will snag things that come down the river. So it's like a man-made snag.
Or just let nature do what it needs to do.
So hopefully, I know that they were supposed to be voting on things in 2020, but I don't know, because of the pandemic, how things went. But there's decisions happening probably this year of what's going to be happening, whether or not there's going to be a dam and some other things. So keep an eye out in the news for the Chehalis River, or check out that Watershed Moment documentary, or you can check out their website.
Very cool. Very cool. Alrighty. So the river that I'm going to focus on is one that I've never been to yet, but I really want to. It's looked at as one of the most endangered rivers in the world. Actually, it's been voted one of the most endangered rivers in the world. And it's also called the hardest working river in the U.S. because it has such a huge economic impact on the United States. And this river is, it's the Colorado River. So let's just dive into it. This is one of my favorite rivers that I've ever read case studies on, because it's just so complex.
Yeah, and it's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. So originally called the Rio del Tizon, or Firebrand River,
that's a way cooler name.
Right? The Colorado River is a major river of North America. Seeing its origin in Rocky Mountain National Park outside of Denver, Colorado, this river flows west and south for over 1,400 miles before ending in the Gulf of California, or also called Sea of Cortez, in northwestern Mexico. This river's drainage basin covers over 246,000 square miles and includes parts of 7 states, which are Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, and California.
Wowzer.
Right? Over 36 million people directly rely on this river for drinking water alone.
Mm-hmm.
To put this into perspective, that's 1 out of every 9 Americans rely on the Colorado River for drinking water.
That's a great way to put it, because, yeah, that other number seems huge, but whoa.
Yeah, 1 in 9 people. You're like, wait, what? Yeah, 1 in 9 people rely on it for just drinking water, and that's not everything else. So another untold number of people also rely on the over 5 million acres of irrigated agricultural land. So if you eat vegetables in the winter, chances are it was grown in the Colorado River Basin, since that is the strongest growing season over winter in the U.S.
Yeah, I heard it's like the lettuce. Like, all of our lettuce comes from there.
Yeah, and
it comes from the desert.
Yeah, right. All of a food that is basically water comes from the desert, pretty much. Yeah, and there's several other crops that, I mean, in the U.S. has to rely on it.
You'd be like, okay, like, sure, like lettuce, we're using the river to water it. Okay, yeah. But because they were growing it in the desert.
Yes, right?
Why?
So this river alone, though, sees over $9 billion annually from river recreation, rafting, camping, etc., and another $26 billion from recreation in the river basin.
Holy cannoli.
Yes. Broadly speaking, since we all know the impact this river plays in agriculture, this revenue feeds over $1.4 trillion into the U.S. economy every year, which is over 6% of the total annual economy, which just comes from this river alone. So the whole U.S. economy every year, 6% is directly related, over 6% is directly related to the Colorado River. Another 16 million jobs are created due to the Colorado River. And to put that into perspective, according to the Nature Conservancy, if just 10% of the river's water were unavailable for people, we would see the loss of $143 billion in economic activity, and 1.6 million jobs would be lost in just 1 year.
Holy crap.
Yeah, and that's just a 10%. Like, if only 10% of the river's water use was unavailable, 143 billion would be gone, and 1.6 million jobs gone.
I wonder how they figured it out. Like, I'm not that I doubt them at all. I'm just curious. I'd be curious how they figured out the.
I'm sure they probably just. Well, I mean, 10% of the river. I mean, I wouldn't say they would take the busiest parts, because obviously there's parts where like more recreation rafting and stuff happens.
Right.
But
like I would think like the Grand Canyon. I'm sure is a hot spot, and because the Colorado River goes through there, right?
Yeah, it goes through, and I'll get into that. I do say that later. I think it's 9 different national parks. So anyway, with all that being said, it's no wonder why people have long fought over this river since the area was first settled in. Just because of the money, the economic impact. And it's always been that way. Obviously not like 1 million jobs back in like the early 1900s, but still it had a huge economic impact.
Yeah. So
let's dive a little bit deeper into the human impacts on the river itself. Now, the Colorado River, like I said earlier, stretches from Colorado to Mexico. However, what is known as the Colorado Basin is a much larger area. And the basin part is really what makes managing the river tricky and difficult. So the basin itself is basically divided into 2 parts, the upper basin and the lower basin. The upper basin consists of Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico. The lower basin consists of Arizona, Nevada, California. In total, 7 states, 9 national parks, and 2 countries are affected by the Colorado River. There's a lot of various governments to factor in, of course.
Right, because we're not even right. A lot of people aren't considering how it's beyond our problem. It's also Mexico.
Yeah, it's also Mexico. So for those of you, though, like me, who grew up in the eastern part of the U.S. or anywhere else in the world where water scarcity is not a problem, water laws that I'm about to explain seem pretty crazy. Because I know whenever I first moved to Texas and I started working for the water utility, I was like thoroughly confused at like how many different state level, local, and boards and whatnot go through and having an authority over water.
My mom was talking and she said, I think we had a cousin that lives in Vegas.
Oh my goodness, yes.
They were paying them not to water their lawn.
Yes. Yeah, there's incentives set up. So when you're in a drought state, water is, of course, extremely important. Eastern U.S. manages from what's called an abundance plan, where the West operates off of a scarcity plan. Most environmental laws we have today were written and passed in the early 1900s by people like my main man, Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Which, when I was in grad school, I did take an environmental law class, and it blew my mind at how many laws that we rely on now were like created in the early 1900s, which when like we didn't understand.
Right. I also think that's so crazy that was like, right, like that was a big time for conservation, and you don't think of like that time.
No.
Anyone caring about that at all.
Yeah, about, hey, conservation. So anyway, so the laws around the Colorado River were established in 1922 with the Colorado River Compact. This compact is what legally divided the river into the upper and lower basin, and this is the key part. It allotted the amount of water each basin receives. So back in 1922, think about the population and everything.
Right.
That's when they decided this is how much water each basin is going to get. So that amount is 7.5 million acre feet of water per basin.
How do they stop? Wait.
Yeah, that's a legit measurement. I know. It makes no sense.
And how do they stop it? Like, how are they like, that's your water and that's your water?
I mean, just usage. Yeah. So it goes through and then it's mitigated and so it's all controlled. So anyway, it is a really weird unit of measurement, million acre feet, but that's how they measure it. As you can imagine, it didn't just take one law to make everything easy peasy with this river, and it's still not. There are many compacts, federal laws, court decisions, and decrees, contracts, and regulatory guidelines that regulate the use of the Colorado River, and collectively they are all called the Law of the River, which does sound pretty epic, right?
Yeah.
Like
the Law of the River.
Yeah. Or like a 1800s like puppet show or something. You know what I mean? Like the Law of the River, and it's like real super cheesy. So legally speaking, the order, quote unquote, of who gets dibs on the river flows, in order of who touches the river directly, then who is in the basin, then who is in the state. So each basin is given that 7.5 million acre feet of water. Then within the basin, that order is followed of who will manage it and how. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it goes like from the river to the basin to the state. And so whoever's directly on the river, they get first dibs on that 7.5 million, and it just goes out from there. So you can imagine how many people, governments, tribes, etc. need to come together to figure this all out. And with a growing population and the allotment of how much water you get that have relatively unchanged for decades, you can begin to see where there are major problems. And humans have definitely impacted the Colorado River in many ways beyond just the laws, which is what I'm going to go into next.
Oh, yeah.
So
mine is on such a small scale compared to the Colorado.
And it's like, this is, if I could just have like a whole book, or at least a shelf on my book, just on like...
A shelf on your book?
A shelf on my bookcase. Listen, folks, we were recording this at like 9 o'clock in the morning, so we were both tired. Laura more so than me. I have no excuse. But if I could just have a whole shelf just on books on the Colorado River and like the case studies and everything that they've done with just the Colorado River, it's fascinating to me is how complex it is.
It's funny though, because mine, even though mine's on a smaller scale, it's just a smaller snapshot of the same thing.
It is. It really is. Alrighty. So let's go ahead and get the first one out of the way, since it's causing a lot of damage around the world right now. The first major impact we'll touch on is climate change, of course. And
which is also a huge one for mine. I didn't even touch. But for sure, the biggest threat to the river is And
we're to the point now where I feel like people just need to stop denying this, because I feel like denying climate change, because it's a fact now. Like, just move beyond it. We're polluting everything. We're having an effect on the world around us because we're not doing things sustainably for resource management whatsoever.
Yeah. And even if you don't believe it's human caused, which is false, even if you
which is false,
that, then we should still try and mitigate for your own sake,
right?
What's happening,
right? Because again, okay, oh goodness, we're gonna go off on a tangent here, but you cannot say, okay, even if it was natural, because people get so hung up, because for the longest time we called it global warming. Mm-hmm. People got so hung up on that warming part that they can't let it go. And it's like, no, it's so much more than that. I hope whoever started saying global warming, which it might have been Al Gore, I hope he's kicking himself in the butt from that, what was the documentary he did?
Inconvenient Truth.
Inconvenient Truth, yeah, because that's really what started off. I hope whoever coined global warming is kicking themselves in the butt, because that, just calling it that instead of just climate change, global warming, that's all people can focus on now. And it's...
Well, right, because global warming is a part of climate change.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the only thing
so much,
like. But it's not hot out.
Yeah, but that's not the point. Alrighty, so anyway, we digress. Alright, so we're seeing catastrophic weather extremes, oceans rising while rivers are failing and fall, like their levels are falling. We're seeing massive related landslides in one area due to extreme rains, but extreme droughts in another. And we just like we said before, we just have to stop making it political and facing the fact that there has to be a better way for us humans to live in a world around us and thrive, and it be equal and balanced. That's the whole point of resource management.
Yeah. We're not, we are, like, it is very clear we are not managing our resources wisely.
No.
We're constantly preaching to our children about other things.
Yes. Anyway. All right, off that soapbox. So, the Colorado River is devastatingly affected by climate change. Increasing temperatures are causing less snowfall to fall up in Colorado, which is where the headwaters are. Up until around the early 90s, which it is, spiked in temperatures since then, Denver used to see about 64 inches of annual snow a year. Now, 30 years later, it's down to no more than 44 inches per year.
Oh, man.
So that missing 20 inches is devastating to those downriver.
20 inches of snow, I feel there is a conversion between snow to water. Like, it's...
Oh, yeah.
Like,
but it's 20 inches around that whole area. You know what I mean? That all goes in, melts and goes into the river, which then is used for everybody downstream. Like, it's just devastating. So this lack of snowfall is, of course, causing droughts. The river basin is facing its 15th year of persistent drought, because it got to the point where, like, yes, it started to see a decrease in snow, and like an ecosystem can sustain that for so long, but it only so long can it be that flexible. Oh, yeah. And then it just gets to a point where even the ecosystem itself is just like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And then it just throws itself into a drought because it just can't. So, but the loss of snow in the Colorado River Basin as a whole has resulted in the river absorbing more of the sun's energy and light. It was just kind of like what Laura... Yep. So this thereby increases the amount of water loss and evaporation, according to
it's a horrible vicious cycle.
Right? Yeah, it just gets worse.
The less rain, the warmer the water, the less evaporation, the less rain.
Yes, yeah. It just gets worse.
Because it's making its own microclimate.
It starts, yes, yeah. Oh, definitely. So this, because of the snow, there's another thing called the albedo effect, which is when the snow and ice reflect sunlight back away from the Earth's surface.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And so the loss of the albedo effect is reducing the flow of the Colorado by 9.5% for each 1 degree Celsius of warming, according to the research that was done. So that, again, is a lot. And remember, I said earlier, 10%. Remember that 10% number? So the Nature Conservancy said if we just lost 10%, let me find it. If just 10% of the river's water use was unavailable for people, we would start to see the loss of 143 billion in economic activity and 1.6 million jobs in just a year. So as our temperatures continue to rise, we're seeing it. Like, we're seeing a loss in jobs. We're seeing a loss in economy because
9%.
We're at 9%. We're seeing it. We are seeing the effects of it. Another way humans have impacted the Colorado River, a more direct way, let's say, is by trying to harness its power.
Yep.
Currently, there are 45 dams along the 1,400 plus mile river, just from a list that I found. Thank you, Wikipedia. The dams do help with numerous things, kind of like what Laura was talking about. There is flood control in some areas, the temporary retention and quick release of flood flows. Hydropower, of course, to generate electricity.
I feel like that was a big one for the Colorado.
Oh my goodness, yes. Because that was like the first, especially out west, that was the source of energy for that area for the longest time.
Because they don't have the coal like we do.
Yeah.
Over here.
All right, so hydropower, yeah. So the dam, blah, blah, blah. All right, the other thing that they're using dams for is irrigation, which I will freaking get into irrigation in a second. Also, municipal reasons, provision of storage of water for residential, commercial, and industrial usage, and regulation to control erratic inflows and provide either stable flow downstream or to release water on demand to downstream users. So those are just the various ways of which that they are using the dams, or they say they're using the dams, but you have to remember, not historically they haven't all worked together. So historically, when these dams have been built, it's not like everybody has been in agreement with it. Because it's been separated. So not only
and that's the problem with yours. Mine is all in one state. Yours,
7 states.
Yeah, good luck to get everybody to work together.
Yeah,
and then 2 countries.
Right? Yeah, right. It is extremely, extremely difficult. So not only
my water, not your water.
Yeah,
like that's
no, it is
higher. Like you're
getting screwed. Yeah. So not only are we indirectly impacting it with climate change, but we are directly impacting it by damming it up, altering its historical trajectory, and utilizing it for our own gain. So my master's is in natural resource management, remember? So when I say it's all about balance, it's literally all about balance. There is a right and a wrong way to manage our resources. And too many people too many people think about right now and not the future of generations. Yes. And okay, because we've already gone off on so many sidebars. This is another pet peeve of mine, sidebar. Like, the reason why national parks were set up originally are not for tourist traps. Like, they were set up to protect a natural resource that we could utilize down the road. So, and same thing with like public lands, they are set aside areas so that if shit hits the fan later, we have backup plans of resources, of things to use if like all of a sudden everything collapses. But everybody wants to use up everything right now, and it just doesn't, that's not how it works.
Right, which is very human of us. Of course, we want to use our resources and think about only ourselves. However, we need to move beyond that and think about
future.
Right. Can
we survive right now with using the very little that we have of XYZ? Yes.
That's I mean, that's truly what, I mean, even, I was going to say it's what separates humans from animals, but even a lot of animals plan for the future seasons.
Crows plan. Like, we're not even smarter than crows at this point. Alrighty, so anyway, too many people are just resistant to changing, ideas, like especially like with the dams. Whenever we start to talk about, should we deconstruct some of these and just manage it a little bit better? And some people are just so set in their ways.
At least, like, I think most dams have like a 50-year contract or something, I was hearing. So like, I think some of them are being deconstructed.
They're talking about it. They're just, everybody's dragging their feet because like, we've always done it this way. And gosh,
what else do we have to do?
That phrase though is hands down the phrase, biggest pet peeve. It gets under my skin. We've always done it this way. But God, it's just people got to get out of their own little bubble and see the bigger picture of what's going on. Anyway, so I just briefly hit on the issues with the Colorado River. And as far as the human dimension and natural resource management, the Colorado River is by far, like I said earlier, my favorite case study because it is extremely complex. So many things factor into it, and there is no single right or wrong answer, but a complexity of interconnecting laws, regulations, etc. that have to come together with the representation to make it happen. So, what is happening to make the Colorado River and their basins a better place for everybody to live? So, as I stated earlier, the law of the river is a combination of all of these laws, regulations, decrees, people that have to come together to figure out how to best allocate that 7.5 million acre feet of water. Cities, tribes, and states have been sitting down together, finally recognizing the problems they are facing with the river. You know, this only started back in 1922, so it only took us 100 years to listen. Yeah, to listen to each other. But they're trying to come up with solutions now. So one solution is the implementation of drought contingency plans. Now, these are plans that are something that pretty much every area within any western state and city has. So I know I work for a water utility, and we have one. Drought contingency plan basically is a step-by-step plan of what to do when there's not enough water in stages. And let me tell you, like drought contingency plans, they're not an if plan, but a when plan down here.
Right.
It's going to be implemented at some point, and more often than not, it's going to be implemented sooner rather than later, multiple times, until like we're just constantly living in a drought plan. I know where we are in Fort Worth, preparing for the future. Like you're only allowed to water 2 days a week. Because, like, we know it's going to get to a point where this is going to get worse. And it started back in the last drought that they had. They're like, hey, you're only allowed to water 2 days a week. And they just kept it because they're like, man, we're screwed if we don't do this.
Yeah. Well, because I feel like irrigation is...
Oh, give me a second. I'm going to go on an irrigation tangent here in a second. So these plans specify stages in which as water decreases more and more, it tells you not only what citizens in the area need to do, but utilities, government agencies, etc. If you live in the Southwest or West, look up your drought plan. And if you live on the East Coast, pick a random city or state and look up their plan. It'll blow your mind at what's all in there, especially if you're on the East Coast, because again, you're just not used to this kind of thing. So anyway, more drought plans are set up to help control what we do and when. But since they are almost constantly in a drought at this point, what else is being done? Again, I can speak passionately about this next one because it's my job, but irrigation. Again, being from the East, originally when I got here to Texas, I was like, man, their grass is really green. Yes, because over 57% of the water use in Texas, which is a drought state, goes towards irrigation. Now, that 57% can also be for like crops. But I do know in my area, more than 30% is just used for household homeowner irrigation. Which is just to make your grass green. Correct.
It's such a waste.
It's such a waste. Okay.
And that's a whole nother tangent. We should do a whole episode on just the, what is it called? Like the...
Xeriscaping?
Yeah, just like, how the American lawn is like the worst
screwed up. Yeah, it's the worst thing. We should do an episode on that because I could get passionate, and I definitely know people who would love to come onto the podcast to speak about that.
Yeah,
we'll have to do that because I know people. Anyway, so you're in Texas. Your grass is not meant to be green in August or November.
Deserty place.
Yes.
Yeah,
like scrubland, prairie. Yeah. Like it's not. It's meant to go through it. Just because your grass is brown does not necessarily mean it's dead. It just means it's chilling, waiting for the next growing season.
Right, like a tree with no leaves.
Correct. It's just waiting.
You don't burn down your trees, you know.
Can you imagine? Like all the leaves fall. Oh my gosh, this tree must be dead. It's got to be dead. Just cut them down. Oh, goodness. All right.
Water the ever-loving crap out of it.
Yeah, right, and it just nothing happens.
But kill it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So brown grass is okay and normal. I mean, sometimes it can be dead. But again, that's the importance of planting native species or drought-tolerant grasses one, it saves you money, so you're only helping yourselves, and two, you're saving everything else because a balance. It's all about balance.
Even the crops, like, I'm all for, farmers and everything, but like maybe we need to think about what crops are we growing in what places.
Yes.
What
instead of lettuce in the desert.
Right. Right. There has to be, like, can't lettuce be grown like in Louisiana? Like,
or this is again though goes back to my case for like aquaponics, hydroponics, which are way more effective, uses a lot less water, and man, the yield that you get from aquaponic systems or hydroponic systems far outweighs traditional farming for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Listeners, you need to, whenever this is over or right now, pause what you're doing, go online, look up lettuce irrigation, and you will see literally the desert, and there's just these perfect green circles.
Yep.
Where they water. Like, there would be nothing there if they weren't constantly watering those crops.
Feel shameful for eating your lettuce.
Or, no, what it is feel shameful for all the lettuce that goes bad in your drawer.
Yes,
yes.
I eat it. At least eat
the
it.
lettuce that I
right?
buy. Yeah.
Because they give you in such big bags. Gosh. Or like the things of spinach, like as a huge container. Who eats that much spinach? Like, gosh. And I'm like a rabbit. Like, I love eating salads, but goodness. All right. Anyway, irrigation. So... yeah.
This is like air our grievances Sunday morning.
It is. I haven't had alcohol. Like, I'm not drinking during this one because I figured 8 a.m. start was too early to drink. So it's like now I just go off on like tangent, Katie. My ADHD meds haven't completely kicked in yet. Oh, goodness. So this is what you get, folks. Completely unmasked. Masked Katie yelling about irrigation at 9 a.m. Alrighty. So anyway, all about balance. So to combat the irrigation crisis, which isn't a crisis, but I'm going to start referring to it as one because people way overwater their lawns, and it's the bane of my existence at work for the past couple years. But a stronger effort for educating the public has been pushed. Bottom line, check your irrigation system. If you don't know how to use it, call a licensed irrigator because, again, it's only costing you and our future. What else is being done? So with irrigation use, many municipalities are looking at how we can better reuse water so that people can effectively irrigate crops, industrial usage, and many other purposes that reuse it effectively.
I know, like gray water stuff?
Yes, and essentially. So, because I know like around here, there are several, like in Texas, since it gets to be a bajillion degrees in August or in the summer, a lot of companies will use reuse water for like in the AC to cool down tech rooms and things like that. So yeah, it's nothing that needs to be for consumption, but how can we use water other ways? People are also starting to explore more effective ways of using renewable energy in the areas beyond the dams. Solar power, wind power, things like that. But of course, this could lead to the possibility of the demolition of dams, which has its own challenges because you change the flow of the river for so long. Going back is harder. Like at least the first time you just dammed it up and you just have to worry about like from the dam back. Where now, like if you like deconstruct that dam, I mean that's a whole other issue.
Change, like what with my issue of removing snags, barriers, and trees. Same thing has happened on the Colorado. They have, I think it was the Army Corps of Engineers was responsible for dredging all rivers around the country. Yes. So they went through the Colorado and removed all the riparian zones.
Yes.
All of the foliage on the sides.
And I didn't.
So you undo that dam.
Mm-hmm. Boom, gone.
No soil. Yeah.
And I didn't go into that because that's one riparian zones. But then also, they've been starting to go down because those are gone, those zones are gone, invasive species have moved in.
Of course.
Of plants. And so now they've had to go, they're starting to try to go through and get rid of all of those invasive species because like those plants are doing just as much damage, if not more, just because now they don't have the correct ecosystems along the riverways. Ah, man, it is a cluster.
The fix, if we don't do the longer we wait, the harder the fix will be.
Oh, gosh. Anyway, so lastly, the most effective solution that people are finally starting to do, like I said earlier, is work together. Only took 100 years. So the upper and lower basin, they have been coming together to talk more, express what they need, and be willing to make compromises while also standing up for those that historically haven't had a voice at the table, like the tribes.
The tribal nations.
Yes, that are finally getting a seat at the table. Because they are independent of everything else. Like, they are independent of the state and whatnot, and so they rely on this river like they have for hundreds, thousands of years, and they didn't even get a say in it from the get-go. So it's amazing what we can do when we accomplish when everyone comes together, just with open minds and genuinely wanting to help each other and not come in ready to hog all the water. It's water.
Because I definitely think the upper basin people, or the lower basin people, probably think the upper basin people are keeping all the water.
And vice versa, because whenever this was originally divided, part of it was because so many people, even then, had moved to California, and so they were like, can't give it all to the Californians. They were going to use it all. But now it's like Vegas, like there's so many major cities out there.
That how far the water is traveling
so
from
far.
the river.
It's man, it's nuts.
To Vegas.
To get to any of the cities, really, because you figure right around the Colorado River, for the most part, like there are towns and cities, but they're all smaller ones that have been historically there for hundreds of years whenever the first settlers went out there. But like the major cities like Vegas are far away. So anyway, we all just need to continue to work together and find the solutions that work for everybody, and only then we'll be able to ensure that these resources will be around for future generations.
Collaborative conservation.
Exactly. The end.
Nice. Well, I hope that listeners, I'm sure you all have very similar stories from rivers in your own area because it's happening everywhere. But hopefully there are also successes, just like with some of these rivers.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, the Cuyahoga River, I mean, that was a good success story too, because at one point, I mean, the Cuyahoga in Ohio caught on fire.
Oh, right. And same with like some New York River, like Hudson Bay and stuff.
Yeah, like caught on a river caught on fire. And so, but now it's been voted like one of the cleanest. It just won an award from the American Rivers or something like that. All right, so I did want to give a big shout out because AmericanRivers.org, it is a really awesome organization, but they have a podcast that is called We Are Rivers, the We Are Rivers podcast, and they started that whole podcast series talking about the Colorado River. So if you're as big of a dork as I am about natural resource management, or you're like, you know what, I am genuinely interested in the Colorado River management, which I don't know how many people are, but it is fascinating to me. Go check out their podcast called We Are Rivers. It's mind-blowing because it's stuff that unless you live directly in the area or you're a high stakeholder in this, most people aren't going to know about it. So definitely shout out to AmericanRivers.org for that podcast that they have, which I did get a lot of information from. And I didn't even listen to all of it because there's tons of episodes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and for our listeners who are like, why are Katy and Laura even talking about rivers? Like, who cares about water? Well, you should all care about water,
right?
But
we kind of need it.
Yeah, but we're also actually recording this episode on the 26th, which is National Rivers Day. So, yep, there's a day for it, and
I mean,
rivers.
And I grew up on rivers. Like, being from Western Pennsylvania, we fished, but so my dad, he did hunt and he fished, and we were a family of 5, and it's not that, like, we absolutely needed that, but, I mean, it still helped, like, to offset some of the cost, And so to this day, I still really love fishing. I love kayaking.
Let's say, what river did you grow up on?
Primarily, like, going to the Allegheny River, because where I specifically grew up, we did have a lot of smaller rivers and creeks and everything like that, but the biggest river that I think I would say had the biggest impact on my life as far as loving rivers was by far the Allegheny, because we have the Allegheny National Forest right outside of there. We have a family cabin that I would always go to. Grew up hiking through the Allegheny National Forest, which I love, and I do desperately miss Allegheny National Forest, but then it also goes the whole way down to Pittsburgh itself, which home sweet home. So for me, it was the Allegheny River is where I grew up.
Mine would have been, right, like you said, there's lots of smaller ones around, but the bigger one where, like, we would go, like my brother's got a boat hang out on is the Potomac.
The Potomac, yeah.
That's between Pennsylvania and Maryland. Well, down into Maryland, yeah.
Yeah. Rivers are important, guys. I mean, and for more things, like I said, just the economic impact from recreation, all kinds of stuff. So go check out AmericanRivers.org. It's a great place to find resources, and you can see every year they do the America's Most Endangered Rivers, the podcast. I love rivers. I don't know, just something about water is soothing and calming. And so hope you guys learned a few things today, and we will talk to you all next week.
Talk to you next week.